What is up, YouTube? Troken here. Welcome back to Draw Phase, and in today's video we're going over all the best decks in Riftbound. We are now 4 days away from the English release. Super exciting stuff. I can't wait to start ripping packs. And basically I wanted to compile a lot of the videos, a lot of the deck lists that I've done in the past 3-4 months, and kind of just do an overview of everything that we've collected in terms of information about the legends. But before we get into it, if you haven't already, please subscribe. We do live streams, we do deck lists, right? We do what is the tournament meta, and we're going to be doing some pack openings on Friday. So if you're looking for a channel, all things Riftbound, this is the one for you. So definitely hit that button. Greatly appreciate your support. Alrighty, so this is going to be a long one, so strap in, guys and girls. Alrighty, so basically, starting with the bottom tier. Now, I'm really sad to say, and I really hate to call it garbage, but it's just the truth. Garen is really difficult to play right now, mainly because the legend just doesn't really do anything. Like, his legend ability is like hard to pop off. It's basically one of those situations where it's really hard to get 4 units on board so early in the game. You're obviously going to be swarming, right? And the fact that you need 4 units to survive and conquer is also very difficult because you are most likely going to be contested in terms of spells, or just like units are already on the battlefield. So either one of them or 2 of those units will most likely die, and then you really don't get the benefit from your legend ability. And the thing about this game is that the legend ability is incredibly important. The more useful the legend is, the better the deck becomes. And the fact that Garen's legend, is in theory strong by drawing 2 cards, but the wording of the legend, I think, is the problem, right? It should have said, like, if you attack with 4+ units at a battlefield, then draw 2. I think that would have been like a lot more cohesive, and then we might have seen a little more Garen play. It's just, like, in my eyes, the worst legend in the game so far. And on top of that, it actually has like the worst signature spell as well, as though it is, because it is like extremely kind of like underwhelming. And also in terms of the chosen champions, like the orange Garen is like okay, but Assault 2 and Shield 2 is, however, strong. It's just the fact that it sits at 5 might. It is in reach of a lot of like strong removal spells like Singularity and even Falling Comet. It's just like in an awkward position. And not to mention that the yellow Garen, right, like, is okay, but they made a Darius card that is also yellow with the same cost and the same might, and it's just better. It just has an added effect. Moving right along into D tier, we have Lee Sin, Yasuo, Lux, and Jinx. Now, the reason these legends are in the D tier is, along with the C tier, is just I think they are quite incomplete in terms of their kit, and also there are just color combinations that are just better than these legends here. Starting off with Lee Sin. Lee Sin is okay. I actually have like a really fun Lee Sin Udyr deck. It seems quite strong in certain matchups. Sorry. However, the thing is, with the color combination orange and yellow, and just looking at Lee Sin's kit, Master Yi is just better. The legend ability is okay. You are paying 1 to put a buff on something, and you really want to utilize those buffs. And the only thing that you can really capitalize on is just Udyr's like insane 4 abilities, which is just really good. But you're gonna have to be spamming buffs on him for him to pop off. And in terms of the signature spell, it's okay at best. It is a little costly. It does do crazy things. However, it's just mid, and even when it comes to Master Yi, not many people play Highlander anyway, so, they're pretty much equal on that. And looking at the chosen champions, the idea of the green Lee Sin just infinitely growing stronger is really cool. Like, I really like it. And, if it does get Zonia'd, it maintains all the buffs. But just like I said before, the color combination just better if you're just gonna play Master Yi. It does have access to everything that Master Yi does, but it's just it's just better. So it's just like one of those awkward situations, kind of just like Garen. If you're playing those color combinations with Garen, just play Sett, and same thing with Lee Sin. The other orange chosen, or the other orange champion for master, or sorry, for Lee Sin is okay too. It's just like, honestly, use the support in other decks, and it just doesn't really shine in this one as well. There are certain iterations where you could make Master Yi a little more competitive. I think out of the structure decks, it's probably the best in terms of value. But other than that, we're just gonna put it here at D tier, just because I think these decks are kind of like incomplete. There's nothing really buff oriented with orange and green right now. If it was like maybe orange and, I'm sorry, green and yellow, like Leona, I think it'd be a little better because it does have access to the cards like Call to Glory, in which you'd really benefit from having buffs on those cards. Going into Yasuo now. Yasuo is like a really awkward position. Like, I really do like the color combination of green and purple. However, the deck in its own is just kind of gimmicky. Like, the legend ability is just kind of like costly, right? Like, you're using 2 energy to move a friendly unit to or from its base, and so you want to really build around that legend ability. However, this, you don't really pop off with combos until the mid to late game. And even though, looking at the kit with the chosen champions, you do have the move Yasuo in the purple form, where it does have ganking, which is really good. And then, being able to move 3 turns to score a point is just kind of okay at best, because you're either going to have open battlefields, because it does sit at 4 might, so it's kind of really susceptible to dying if it's going to be contested with either spells or units. And it's just like one of those things where you have to wait and set up, and then kind of like take the last couple points with Yasuo. And sometimes there's nothing you can really do when you're playing against it, right? However, there's just the way the meta has evolved, there's just plenty of spells, plenty of things that people could do to where they can just kind of stop it. And looking at the green Yasuo, although like really strong, it's just too costly. 6 and 2 energy, and yes, when it does attack, it does deal like its might. So if you somehow buff its might, it can pretty much take care of a lot of things. The issue is, again, like if you're going to combine it with Ride the Wind, or it's moving in, moving out, maybe comboing with Mask of Foresight to get a little bit more might on board or onto your Yasuo, because it stacks. The Mask of Foresight ability does stack. It's just like kind of weak. Just because it's just not quite there yet. Like I said, it's kind of like a very gimmicky thing. And again, it like pops off like mid to late game. And honestly, in this meta that we have right now, the tempo decks tend to shine just because they have a strong early game, a good mid game, and then a strong late game to pop off with whatever they're doing. Like the color combination, like I said, is good. It's really interesting. It's one of those legends that just has the one color combination, and that's it. And then looking at the Last Breath, again, just incredibly costly. So again, like you have to really like run seals in order to help mitigate some of those power costs. But the thing is, if you run seals, you're going to be a little slow. And in this meta, it's just like if you don't have a good early game, then you kind of just fizzle into nothingness, and you can't really keep up with the way the format is right now. Next, we're talking about Lux. I really like Lux, honestly. It's one of those decks where you play with your friends for fun. It's strong in a 2v2 format. However, if you're looking at 1v1 and you want a better color, better legend for that color combination, you kind of just are looking to play with Victor. The legend is basically says like if you play a card with 5 or more, you get to draw a card. So any spell that you have that costs 5 or more, basically, in its text just says draw an extra card. Draw card, hand advantage, or card advantage is very strong. However, like I've said before, the way the meta is and just the way how the decks have been playing that are very good, you really need a good early game. And the issue is that although Lux has good matchups against things like Volibear because it has access to Call the Weak, it's just like it doesn't really pop off until the late game. And even in the late game, it's pretty much just removal. And then you kind of just want to take over a battlefield and like pop off with the time warp combo. Time warp is like really good. Like if you do get there, right? It's just there's nothing your opponent can do with it other than Mystic Reversal and or Wind Wall, and those are cards that generally aren't main decked, maybe side decked. So even though if you do win game one, they do have that in that sideboard, then you kind of just you kind of just like lose because having Time Warp, Mystic Reversal, or Wind Wall kind of just like shuts down the game, and then you kind of just like lose from there. Again, like it does have access to the strongest spells, in my opinion, in terms of damage with like Unchecked Power and Singularity and Falling Comet and so forth. And does have like decent mid game cards with Sprite Mother. Even as of recently, Imperial Decree has been used as a good form of removal. As you know, with the color combination of blue and yellow, you have things with cheap units in terms of recruits, right? With cards like Recruit the Vanguard, where you can just move in a recruit and just kind of take out a Volibear if you really want to by playing Imperial Decree. However, you know, that's like such a specific niche, and that is like kind of like playing from behind, which is something you really don't want to do in this format. And it's just kind of like one of those decks where, yes, it is fun. Yes, it is cool to play Time Warp. However, in a competitive sense, it's just not really there quite yet. Like I said before, I think these decks are just incomplete. They don't have a full they're not like fully thought out yet. Hopefully by the second set they'll have a little more support to where they pop off and we can see a little more diversification in the meta. Next we have Jinx. Now this actually really kind of like breaks my heart to put Jinx in such a low tier. There are a couple variations of the deck where that's more mid-rangey with the Rebel Jinx and Unlicensed Armory. Shout out to Oni. And it's just like really good. It's much better than the aggro Jinx. However, it's just like I said before with Lux, this deck kind of just feels incomplete, right? Like it just doesn't have that much support in terms of either you're going to go big on the early game and or like a mid-range tempo build. It's just the legend ability is lacking, right? Like yes, it is good if you have one card in hand, then you get to start drawing two. And the discard is just like there's not that much benefit right now the way with the cards that we have for discarding, other than you know, maybe like grabbing a super mega death rocket, but then you also have to conquer on top of that. And the issue with like having a aggressive aggro deck in the game is kind of like awkward. All right, so this isn't Magic the Gathering where you can put as much units on board and get your opponent's life total to 0. This is like a point scoring game, and you know, you can be aggressive early game, score maybe 3, possibly 4 points, but then you know your opponent just has a lot of time to kind of respond to the board state. As though it is like every turn you can score up maybe up to 2 points, right? And at that point, you know, the other decks are built to kind of counteract aggressive decks naturally, right? In any type of mid-range tempo build, just by popping down bigger units. The great thing that Jinx has going for it, along with Annie, is the Vi and Ride the Wind combo. It is a force to be reckoned with. It is one of the stronger combos in the game right now. And then if you're playing red and purple, or if you're going against red and purple decks, expect that. You know, it does have access to Sun Disc, so you can always like have units coming in ready, which is incredibly strong. We've also seen as of late Teemo being added to the Jinx decks. However, like I just said, it is just not complete. There is not that much benefit from discarding, right? And the legend ability, although strong, you know, by drawing an extra card per turn, your hand has to be so low that it really does limit your options as to what you can do and how can you respond to the board state. Moving on to C tier, we have Volibear, Leona, and Annie. And just like the tier below this, it is just like almost incomplete decks, although Annie has the most potential. I was thinking about putting in the B tier. However, it's just, again, when it comes to just not having all those resources there quite yet, and just the way the format is, it is kind of lacking in competitive play. However, we're starting to enter the area where this is actually really good in maybe Nexus nights, right, at your local game stores. You know, you might win thirds, maybe second place. However, just looking at Volibear, it is very two-dimensional in its core. This is a ramp deck, and you more than likely going to be playing Dazzling Aurora. This is where the deck really shines. Any other iteration is kind of just awkward because, why not get big units for free if you're paying big units anyway? Because, like I said, you want to be really capitalizing on your legend ability. So, by playing a mighty unit and being able to channel one rune exhausted is inherently strong. However, looking at the rest of its kit, like the volley bears in its own right are like scary and a force to be reckoned with, but the red volley bear looking at 10 energy and 2 power, really really costly. So obviously you're gonna be using dazzling aurora to pop this onto the battlefield. It does have the strongest keyword with deflect 2, which is insane. However, if it because it does have deflect 2, no opponent is going to be really trying to target this with something, but rather either contest it with some units and or just like a board clear with maybe like a Warwick combo or anything like that. So deflect 2 is actually like too good that people just don't want to interact with it. By dealing damage with targeting. So it's just kind of like an awkward situation where it's like, yeah, it is an insane ability. However, it's just like, you can avoid it by, or you just don't deal with it by just not interacting with it. And the other volley bear, like, you're never going to be playing this raw other than using Dazzling Aurora. Shield 3 tank is insanely strong, and it kind of just has to sit there at a battlefield. However, 10 Might is easily overrun by like decks like with Master Yi and White Flame Protector. So it is not like unbeatable. However, and the thing is, like with any Dazzling Aurora deck, it's pretty much like one per turn. Maybe you're drawing or dropping down like one or two big units. If you do get to snowball, you'll definitely get there. However, again, gear removal is a thing, so you might get away with game one. However, if they sideboard any type of gear removal, then you're kind of just like left with a deck with a bunch of big units that you can pretty much only play once per turn, and then that's just where this deck sits. Moving on to Leona. Now, Leona is actually like a unique color combination in yellow and green. So it does have access to a lot of things. However, the synergy just isn't quite there. Because like you really want to be stunning things left and right to really benefit from the legend ability. And honestly, like how many times are you going to be stunning things other than moving in with Leona. But in order to stun often, you have to pull her out and then put her back into the battlefield. And you just kind of like get a buff with that, with the legend ability. Yes, the way the stun works is that they don't deal damage to you. You can maybe like kill units left and right. However, there are only the Solari Shield Bearer, stuns a unit, and also the Rune Prison stuns a unit. Benefiting from the stuns is the green Leona, and I think that is extremely strong. I honestly have played a Leona deck where that is better off as your chosen champion because it's a great come from behind card. However, just looking at it's just like, again, like I said before, just like incomplete. I just think it needs a little more support from with being able to stun cards. Like, yes, Zenith Blade is a cool signature spell. You stun an enemy unit at a battlefield, and then you may move a friendly unit to that enemy unit's battlefield. So it does like kind of like respond very well in terms of like showdowns. However, it's just like, yeah, it's just lacking a little bit of something, I just think it's just like a little like fragmented in the way the deck should work right now, and it's pulling in a lot of cards that work well in other decks to try to make itself work, as to having like an actual like good synergistic kit for the cards in the deck. Now, Annie is actually a deck where I was like heavily contemplating moving it up to B tier. However, I just think it suffers also from the same thing that Jinx does, where it has had to really rely on the Vi and Ride the Wind combo to kind of like pop off and take care of certain board states. As you do have great cards early game with Stack Deck, Traveling Merchant, maybe some Poros. You have good spells in Fight or Flight, Ride the Wind, and stuff like that. But really, we're pulling in Kaisa and maybe Darius's for the late game. comboing in again with like cleaves and stuff to kind of like pop off. So I mean, but the thing is, like Kaisa and Darius's are just better, like in the Darius deck, because you have support from some like really good removal cards. The legend ability, looking at its kit, is extremely strong. You know, having always 2 runes on your opponent turns ready to go is insane. You have access to fight or flight. You can even ride the wind on your opponent's turn, gusting those pesky sprite mothers and stuff like that. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's strong. You can rebuke. You have, giving you a little more access to invert timelines. But like I just said before, it just feels like incomplete. Like if your opponent does drag out the game past your Vi combo, there's really little you can do when it comes to contesting big units. And I just think that this is where like this color combination like really lacks in is the late game. Again, like great, amazing early to mid game, but then if you don't get to those 8 points as fast as possible, you kind of just like fall and you just get steamed rolled over. Then we're going into the B tier. Now, this tier is where it starts to be viable for your Nexus Knights. These decks can easily maybe take second or first place, depending on like how good you are at the game. Honestly, first we're gonna start off with Ahri, and I think the best thing about Ahri is that it is incredibly balanced. Right? It is not too overpowered. It is not so underwhelming. The legend ability is just inherently good. That is, it is static. With being able to -1 enemy unit that is attacking a battlefield you control. People are playing this in 2 different ways. Like one is like a mid-range tempo build, utilizing cards like Blitzcrank and Thousand-Tailed Watcher near the mid to late game. And also with like powerful champion units, as in Ahri Acquisitive is also incredibly good. If you just sit onto a battlefield, it is very hard for your opponent to kind of take over. It does sit at 3 might, so it is really susceptible to like a lot of like spell removal. However, you have access to strong cards because of the unique color combination. You get cards like Smokescreen, which shuts down your opponent because -4 is just absolutely insane. You have a really good a spell in Charm, which is really interesting that this isn't actually her signature spell. Speaking of her signature spell, Foxfire is like good. It's a great sideboard card, something that you can use against swarm decks, or you can even just like smoke screen down a big unit and kind of kill it with a Foxfire. So many ways to tempo out really powerful spells. However, like I said before, the hold Ahri, although being in a time warp combo, is really cool, right? Super controlly. However, I just think the way that the meta has developed, like you really, and I know I've been saying this over and over again, you really need a good early game, you need a decent mid game, and you need a good late game to kind of like take the game away from your opponent. That's just the way the game is right now. And like it's just fair, honestly. Like I wouldn't mind playing against an Ahri deck because it's fun. It's challenging, and also I don't mind playing as an Ahri deck because it is also not too incredibly overpowered. This is what I wish all the decks were. Honestly, I wish they were as balanced as Ahri was, or I wish the other decks are as balanced as Ahri is, but it's just not the case. And honestly, it's okay. Yeah, I really like this deck. I really like Ahri. I'm considering maining Ahri when the game comes out. I still have to make some decisions about that. But honestly, yeah, solid legend, solid deck. Easily something you can bring to your Nexus Knights and maybe win some prize packs. The next deck in this tier is Misfortune, the best, in my opinion, Dazzling Aurora deck, as the color combination is insane. Now, the legend ability is really good, as you don't really have to pay for anything. You just tap Misfortune, and then you can give a unit ganking this turn. Really strong, considering you really want to capitalize with Dazzling Aurora, dropping big dudes. Also, with purple in its color combination, Mind Splitter is such a force to be reckoned with. When this comes down from Dazzling Aurora, it is really hard to come back. It's just like a really big threat. And also like the signature spell with Misfortune Bullet Time. This card is just absolutely insane. You can just blow up a board so easily. You can also combo it with maybe like a Warwick if you really want to. However, the fact that it doesn't target anything, so you don't have to play deflect costs. Yes, you do have to recycle pretty much as many runes as possible to take care of it, but as long as it doesn't get defied, then you can just easily like remove everything from the game. And honestly, like getting rid of your runes by recycling them after Aurora is down is not that big of a deal, because you are just snowballing and snowballing and snowballing into a position where your opponent really can't come back. So the fact that Bullet Time and Dazzling Aurora work well with each other makes this, in my opinion, the best Dazzling Aurora deck. Also, having access to something like Sabotage, where you can kind of control your opponent's hand, stack deck to dig for that Dazzling Aurora. It's just like an insane synergy when it comes to popping down big units. And honestly, the champions are also very good. The orange Misfortune is generally played in the Dazzling Aurora Misfortune build, just because as ganking and it can accelerate, and also the first time it moves, you can ready something that is exhausted, and it's just like really beneficial to big things like the Mountain Drake, which is often played, even the orange Voli Bear, and also the Anivia. Having it move twice is pretty insane. If you give it ganking, then it can pop over to the other battlefield and kind of clear it with its static ability. So yeah, this is where we're getting to the point where these decks are just like really super, not highly competitive, but to where they're being something that you can bring to Nexus Knights and really, really, really fight for that first place position. Next, we have our friend, the Yordle Teemo. Teemo's a unique color combination in blue and purple. And honestly, like 2 days ago, I would have put this at a lower tier. However, there's just been an update, and you can actually play your chosen champion, Teemo, that has a hidden ability onto a occupying battlefield with your unit. So that is insane. It doesn't have to be from your hand anymore. So that's really, really cool. That's really cool, because people are gonna know anyway that it's in your hand, right? When you pop it off with your legend ability. Speaking of legend, obviously very synergistic with hidden cards. The fact that you only need to pay one energy instead of recycling a rune is extremely strong. Like, it really helps out your rune mitigation and your rune resources like very, very well, to where you can really pop off late game with playing big units and not having that much of a of a downside. Like Dr. Mundo is oftenly used in a Teemo deck, just because you are playing a lot of cheap things, in terms of your scrap heaps digging into your deck. Also uses Ride the Wind with Dr. Mundo just to kind of steamroll over your opponents. In terms of its kit with Guerrilla Warfare, it's a really interesting signature spell. Return up to 2 cards with hidden from your trash to your hand, and you can hide ignoring costs this turn. Is like really cool. So we really want to put in as many hidden cards as possible. You got your Sprite Call, your Tide Turners, you Consult the Pests, and of course your Teemos. Fighter Flights, the list goes on and on and on. However, not long enough, because I just think that this deck needs maybe 2 or 3 more like stronger hidden cards, and I think this would be like probably more on the side of top tier. Next, we have our boy Victor. Now, initially when the game was starting to release cars, I thought Victor was going to be the best deck in the game. I'm not going to lie there. However, it's just like okay. It is not terrible. It is not amazing. I think it is inherently like a really good legend ability. There's always something to do turn 1, but it is heavily dependent on making it a swarm build, right? There are different iterations of it where you can, kind of like tempo out and just, have a good late game with cards like Riptide Rex or Harness Dragon, also including Thousand Tailed Watcher, because that card's just insane. However, I think this deck really does shine when you are utilizing Grand Stratagem and having a bunch of recruits, because you can really just like steamroll your opponent. There's just so very little your opponent can do against Grand Stratagem other than wind wall it, and if they're not playing green, then you're pretty safe at that point. Also, you have really good matchups against Misfortune and Volibear Dazzling Aurora, because you have access to Call the Weak. So being able to just kill a recruit and they have to kill Volibear or Mind Splitter is just like incredibly strong. Also, like the Cruel Patron is a great like mid game card. So it definitely checks off the list of like having like a decent mid game. Because 4 for 6 and you're not like ruining your resources in that sense is like incredibly strong. And I just think it's like really, it's like a solid deck. It is not like incredibly overpowered. It is not too underwhelming as well. The champion unit, obviously the innovator is something that you want to build completely different, as though it only benefits from playing like reaction spell cards. Whereas the Victor leader benefits from, just like your cheap units dying. So obviously we want to capitalize by putting in our Soaring Scouts and our Watchful Sentries. Even cards like Faithful Manufacturer, or if they do die, you do get a recruit, and you can just contest the board with a late game grand stratagem. This card is like really strong, and it's like the bread and butter of the deck, just because it is game winning. After your opponent is just steamrolled by those recruits, and you score the 2 points, and the next turn, like it's very hard for them to come back if they have nothing in their base. Then you just score another 2 points. So it's easy to score after playing grand stratagem 4 points. And then you can just tail in the game with maybe Thousand-Tailed Watcher, dropping down some Hornus Dragons to kind of control their side of the board, and you can kind of get away with it. It does have bad matchups against Kaisa and Master Yi, of course, mainly because of Zonias, right? So even if you are deleting some of their things, like you have to, on their tail end, on their next turn, they can just ready the units and move back in, take away that board state from you. And at that point, I think you've spent too many resources playing Grand Stratagem, where it's kind of like hard to come back. But all in all, like a decent deck. It's a great starter deck too in terms of the structure deck, so it's something definitely to pick up. And I would argue like this or the Lee Sin deck is something you would have to play in any type of sealed event that your local game stores are playing. But in terms of like competitive meta, we do see it, top three often. It's just like, again, missing some key components. I think one thing I've always talked about is that I wish there was a Death Knell ability where you can recreate might recruit unit, right? And that's just basically all this deck really needs, and then it would pop off. But yeah, all in all, like honestly, super. Like I just really like it. I think it's like a really solid deck. In the same sense of Ahri, where it's like pretty balanced, not too overpowered, and not too underwhelming. Moving on to the A tier, we have Darius and Sett. Starting off with Sett, honestly, guys, when this game was starting to be released, I was playing on Pixelborn and Tabletop Simulator, and Sett was just like conquering the competitive play in terms of unofficial tournaments, mainly because of its strong ability. The legend ability is just absolutely insane. Initially, people were playing a Aurora build, although it has evolved into something different, or with a tempo mid-ranged, where you're just dumping out units, buffing them, and utilizing your legend ability. Having like a Zonias basically attached to your legend is just incredibly strong. You do have to recycle a rune in order to recall the unit, so it does suffer a little bit in terms of resource management. However, just throwing a couple seals in there is really good, as it pays for itself, basically. And then also just looking at the champion units, they're both like incredibly strong. The yellow one with the tank, it gets +1 for each buffed friendly unit. So, you throw things in there like Pit Rookie and Arena Bar, where it is consistently buffing your units. And also Kinku Monk is also only being played in this deck, as when you play it, you can buff up to 2 friendly units, giving those cards like a little bit of safety because of the legend ability, being able to recall those units over and over again. And also the Sett Brawler is just so strong. When it gets played, it gets buffed, so it inherently can be recalled with your legend ability, and also you can spend the buff to make it an 8 might unit, which is incredibly strong. And also just like being able to make Fiora mighty. I think Fiora shines in this deck very, very well, because it just gets like a lot of keywords that are just like really important, like deflect and ganking and shield. And also just it being able to be recalled once again. You can also save cards with Call to Glory, which is also like a very strong card played in this deck. Because you can just like ignore the energy costs and then just give a unit 3 might by spending the buff. So you're essentially giving it +2. However, it is a tricky card that your opponent's like it's like hard to predict. And yeah, it's just like all in all a great kit. The signature spell and Showstopper is extremely strong too. Because you're buffing a friendly unit, moving it to a battlefield. You know, obviously only playing this when you can win the showdown. And if it does die, right, by any types of battle tricks, your opponent just has to deal with it once again because of the legend ability. It's just like absolutely insane. It is just like top tier, incredibly strong. I don't think the Aurora build is really relevant anymore. I think what we've developed over time is just much better than the Aurora build. Misfortune kind of just like took that spot for Sett, but this deck is just honestly really really good and honestly not too expensive too to craft. Like you're just like sitting on a couple rares and a couple of epics, and honestly you can pretty much just if you play carefully win a lot of games. And you know, it's in the beginning it was like top tier, it was the best deck in the game, and that is exactly why it is on A tier, because it still holds strong. Next we have Darius. Now Darius is just so strong, and honestly there is really only one way to play this deck, and that is in a hook build. If it wasn't for baited hook, honestly this card or this deck wouldn't be as strong as it is. However, inherently its legend ability is really good because of it reaction speed, and if you've played something before you can add one, and that is just really good in the early game. It is really good in the mid game. In the late game, you know, it's just also very strong, and the way this color combination also tempos out is extremely important because of baited hook. You know, you are creating recruits with things like Faithful Manufactor, sacrificing that recruit to potentially pop out a Vayne, right? And Vayne enters ready if an opponent is on a battlefield, so you can move in for 5. Also, the fact that it has access to Kaisa with the Conquering effect. Also, you know, just the way, like I said, it tempos out with the might in terms of relation to baited hook. You know, you have your 1 might recruits, you have your 2 might Vayne, you have your 3 might Draven able to be pulled out, going into your Kaisa as well. And also Spectral Matron, so you can kind of swarm. It actually is a better swarm deck than Victor, as, you know, if you're popping off a Vanguard Captain for a Spectral Matron and then replaying that Vanguard Captain, you just have so many units on board, and then you pop off with the Grand Stratagem just to kind of take the game. It is very heavily reliant on baited hook, but if you do get a early baited hook, it's really hard for your opponent just to kind of take the game from you, as you just have so much value in terms of using that card to your benefit. And honestly, when it comes to the chosen champion, you know, we're always going to be running the red Darius because it's just a stronger. Throwing on a cleave onto it makes it a 10 might unit, and it readies it because of its static ability, and it's just so strong. It can test a lot of big units, and it's just like really good. Like, it's just like the way this curves out is just so perfect. This is like near perfect, honestly. It is only being trumped, honestly. Like, this has the most potential to be S tier, honestly, in my opinion. Yes, because it is a baited hook, and even if you do get to a matchup where they're just removing baited hook with some gear removal, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end of the game, because you can swarm very easily, and you have strong cards with Kaisa, Draven, Vayne, and also a bunch of early game cards with Trifarian Glory Seeker, Vanguard Captain. Even like raw casting Spectral Matron isn't terrible. However, you do want to benefit from baited hook. So yeah, honestly, guys, this game is just, or this deck is just like absolutely insane. It is really top tier. I only put it down to S tier just because it is so reliant on baited hook. But other than that, like, definitely something to bring to your Nexus Knights. And we've made it, guys, to the end of the video. And obviously, the S tier decks are Kaisa and Master Yi. Starting off with Master Yi, there is little to be said about these two decks. They're just incredibly strong. The color combinations are amazing. The legend in Master Yi is just insane. A static ability when a unit is defending, it gets +2. That makes your Poro actually inherently +5. And with fortified position, I think it goes all the way up to +6. It's just stupid, crazy good. And also like the legend units, it's just good. The fact that E enters ready, it can move in, and then it has ganking as well. It is just so hard because it has so much. It has access to all of the best cards. It has Defy. Defy hits 65% of spells. You can move around stuff with Charm, and then you can just sit at a battlefield on guard buffs units. Discipline is just insane. Have only for two, only for two. You can plus 2 might a unit, and you get to draw one. It has access to Zonias. As of late, we've been seeing Tasty Feyfolk being put into the deck. This, in combination with Zonias, is absolutely insane. It ramps up very well. And again, the early game, you have basically no power costs, right, other than the Defy, and so you can just not necessarily ramp. It does have ramp cards with like Find Your Center, obviously, and if the Tasty Feyfolk dies, it does ramp as well. However, you just like curve out really well. You're not spending any power costs in your cards, like I said, other than Defy. Kiana is extremely strong because of the Deflect and its ability to draw a card or channel one Rune Exhausted when it is conquering. And yeah, guys, just honestly, there's just like very little to say about Master Yi. It is strong. It is overpowered. It is just too good. I think this legend needs a little more. Like it should have been honestly +1. Then it would have been a little fair. Then it would have been a little more balanced. However, this is just the game state that we're in, and the fact that you get improving grounds guaranteed is pretty cool. And also like the kit for it is just insanely good, although we don't really use much of other than the orange Master Yi. Highlander is decent, but honestly we have 3 Zonias. That's enough, because honestly if you're using up your 3 Zonias and you're reliant on your Highlanders, then honestly like you're probably just going to lose the game anyway. Also, White Flame Protector is insane. Giving a unit +8 is ridiculous, and the fact that it could just pretty much steamroll over anything. Even also, if your opponent is holding on to battlefields, you have access to something like Dead Broom Predator, where it could just move into a battlefield, and then you're just be holding for 10 might because of your legend ability. It's been tested, it's been proven. This has won regional tournaments in China. And yeah, it's just like an overwhelming population of Master Yi players out there. However, with good reason, just because the way it curves out, the resources that it has is just incredibly strong. And honestly, like if you want to win those prize packs, you should just honestly play one of these 2 decks. But yeah, Master Yi easily S tier. So very strong, so hard to beat, and honestly it kind of like pilots itself. Very little decision making, and it's just absolutely insane. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Kaisa. Obviously this has won the most regional tournaments in first place. Its legend ability is basically, here, have a seal for free in the beginning of the game, and that's what makes this card so strong, right? Like, so if there's one thing to take from this tier list is how impactful your legend ability is going to be for the deck, and the fact that this is just it's a seal. You can add a power at reaction speed whenever you would like, and that just gives you access to so many things like a free Hextech Ray, and I mean free by not paying the power. Obviously Smokescreen as well, Void Seeker. Those cards are just so strong. Also, mitigating by 1 power, Falling Star, which is arguably the best removal in the game next to Singularity, or maybe Singularity is better than Falling Star, and maybe you think Falling Star is better than Singularity. They work in the same regard, except Falling Star you can play obviously a lot earlier. And for 2-in-1, being able to do it twice with the reflexive triggers is insane too. So it just has so much advantage. Obviously, we're playing the red Darius with it, on top of Cleave. And honestly, guys, it's just like Ravenbloom Student shines here because you are able to play so many spells. Red and blue has literally all the removal. You have Singularity, you have Void Seeker. You have Hextech Ray, you have Falling Star. I mean, it's just like the things that this deck can do is absolutely insane. Red and blue is just the strongest color combination, mainly because look, you have access to Darius and you have also access to Thousand Tail Watcher, and Thousand Tail Watcher is just absolutely insane. The fact that you can accelerate it too, also like having the chosen champion in Kaisa Survivor is also really good because people add this to their decks. Like Annie adds it to the deck, even Jinx adds it to the deck. Anything red basically has Kaisa if you want to be competitive enough. But this is like it's just there, right? Like you just have it as your chosen champion. So with 5 runes, you can already accelerate and conquer and draw a card. Move back, conquer, and draw a card. It is just probably in my opinion, like the best champion unit in the game because it's so fast and it's so strong. You're scoring a point and drawing a card. It's just so hard to pop over. Also, like Ravenbloom student shines in this deck because you're playing so many spells. So you have access to smoke screen just in case there's too many big units. And honestly, just the way this deck curves out, it is just easily the best deck in the game, in my opinion. I just put it up with Master Yi because they kind of like fight for the first place in tournaments often, right? I think maybe one time Master Yi came out on top. However, for the most part, Kaisa's come out on top just because it has so many resources and the legend ability is so very strong. So that is it, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching the video. This has turned out to be quite a long one. However, one that's very necessary with the game coming out. I just wanted to make sure that for those who are unfamiliar with Riftbound and have just started seeing it on the walls of their local game stores, I'm like, hey, what's this game? This video is for you. It'll help you out, like kind of figure out what are the best legends and why, what to look out for. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.